Hands where I can see them. Don't you move. Officer Dale Morgan's voice thundered through the narrow hallway of the Sanders home. His flashlight beam sliced through the darkness, trembling slightly in his hand. Across from him stood Elijah Sanders, a quiet auto mechanic still in his work overalls, blinking against the light. His wife, Nina, stood behind him, her voice breaking. "Please, he didn't do anything." But the command came again, louder this time. "Don't move." A baby started crying from the next room. The tension snapped like glass. 1 second of panic. One wrong twitch. And then, bang. The bullet hit before anyone even realized what happened. Elijah collapsed beside the couch, blood soaking into the carpet. Nina's scream ripped through the silence as Officer Morgan froze, his own heartbeat louder than the shot that ended the peace of an entire neighborhood. What the Brookfield police would claim later was that it was an accident. What they wouldn't say was why they were even there. And what no one expected was that the man they just shot was hiding a truth that could take down the whole department. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe. Because what happened in that house at midnight will make you question what justice really means in small-town America. The day before the shooting was like any other in Brookfield, a small town where everyone still waved at passing cars and the sheriff's office doubled as the local gossip center. Elijah Sanders, 38, was the kind of man people described as steady. He ran a small auto repair shop off Main Street, the kind of place where the bell over the door jingled and the smell of motor oil clung to the air like history. Elijah worked long hours, but he never complained. He believed in doing things right, tightening every bolt, finishing every job, and making it home before dark for dinner with his wife and baby daughter. That evening, the sunset turned the sky the color of rust as he locked up the shop. His phone buzzed, a message from his wife, Nina. "Hurry home, Eli. Lila won't sleep without you." He smiled, wiped his hands on a rag, and texted back. "On my way, sweetheart. Tell her Daddy's bringing home pie." Back at their modest house on Willow Creek Drive, Nina was in the kitchen, humming to the baby monitor's soft static. The baby, Lila, had finally dozed off after a long day of teething and tears. The house smelled faintly of cinnamon and fried chicken, Elijah's favorite. Their life wasn't perfect. Money was tight. Bills stacked up faster than they could pay them. But in that moment, sitting at the dinner table, they felt rich in all the ways that mattered. They laughed over a cheap bottle of wine, trading stories about the day, customers at the shop, a new family moving in next door, how Nina's daycare shift had run long. Then, the conversation shifted to something heavier. "I got a weird call today," Elijah said, lowering his voice. A man asked about the old Ford the First fixed up last month, the one that went to the police auction. He said it wasn't supposed to be sold yet. Nina frowned. "You think something's wrong with it?" He shook his head. "No." But his tone, something about it felt off. He hung up before I could ask who he was. They shrugged it off. In small towns, rumors and confusion spread faster than facts. Neither of them could have known that that phone call, a simple question about a car, would be the first domino in a chain of events that would destroy everything. Later that night, as the rain started tapping softly on the roof, Elijah kissed Nina goodnight. He lingered a moment longer by the crib, watching Lila's tiny chest rise and fall. He didn't know it would be the last time he saw her sleeping in peace. The storm rolled in just after midnight. Wind rattled the window panes, and thunder cracked across Brookfield like cannon fire. Inside the Sanders' small home, the baby monitor glowed faintly on the nightstand, its softness blending with the patter of rain. Elijah stirred in bed, half asleep. He thought he heard something, maybe the wind, maybe a car door slamming in the distance. Then came the sound again, sharper this time. A thud. Another. Then bang. The front door exploded inward. Glass shattered. Wood splinters flew through the hallway. Flashlights cut through the darkness, and voices roared over each other. "Police! Get down! Hands where I can see them! Move and you're done!" Nina bolted upright, her heart racing. "Elijah!" He was already out of bed, instincts taking over. Years of working security before he opened the shop had taught him to move fast, think faster. He raised his hands as he stepped into the narrow hallway. "Wait! There's a baby in the house!" But the shouting drowned him out. The beams of light found his chest, blinding and cold. In the living room, Officer Dale Morgan led the raid team, adrenaline pulsing through his veins. He wasn't supposed to be there that night. He'd volunteered after getting a last-minute tip from an informant. A stolen car, connected to a robbery, was allegedly hidden at the Sanders address. The problem? The address was wrong. Morgan's partner, Officer Brett Harlow, hesitated at the doorway. "Dale," dispatch said this was number 24, right? Morgan didn't even hear him. The radio crackled with static. His pulse drowned everything else out. He thought he saw a weapon in Elijah's hand, but it was just the glint of light reflecting off the metal wrench Elijah had grabbed to secure the broken door hinge earlier that day. "Drop it!" Morgan screamed. Elijah froze. "It's not a..." Bang! The sound tore through the house like lightning splitting a tree. Nina screamed. The baby monitor crashed to the floor. Elijah stumbled backward, clutching his chest. The wrench fell with a dull clatter. For one terrible second, everything went silent. No shouting, no movement, just the heavy sound of rain hitting the roof. Then chaos returned. Nina dropped to her knees, pressing her hands against Elijah's wound. "Help him! Somebody help him!" Morgan's hands shook as he lowered his gun. He had something in his hand. He moved. But even he didn't believe his own words. Officer Harlow rushed forward, grabbing the radio. "Dispatch, shots fired. Civilian down. We need medical now." Nina screamed again. "He wasn't armed. My husband wasn't armed." Her voice echoed down the street as neighbors began to step out, lights flickering on one by one. Rain poured harder, washing blood across the living room floor. Elijah tried to speak, but only blood came out. His hand found Nina's trembling fingers. "Lila," he whispered. "Take care of." His body went still. For a long moment, Officer Morgan just stood there, frozen, drenched in sweat, his gun still smoking. He'd trained for danger, for control, for precision. But no amount of training prepared him for this. By the time the ambulance arrived, Elijah Sanders was gone. And somewhere, in the middle of the confusion, someone quietly switched off one of the officer's body cameras. The report filed later that night would read, "Suspect reached for a weapon. Officer acted in self-defense." But the truth was something no report could hide, because Nina Sanders had seen everything. And she wasn't about to stay quiet. By dawn, Brookfield was buzzing. The storm had passed, but the damage lingered like a bruise that wouldn't fade. Yellow police tape fluttered across the Sanders porch. Neighbors whispered behind fences. Inside the house, officers moved mechanically, snapping photos, collecting shell casings, pretending to follow procedure. Nina sat on the front steps wrapped in a hospital blanket. Her face was pale, her hands still stained with her husband's blood. An officer crouched beside her, reading from a clipboard. "Ma'am, we understand this was a tragic mistake." She cut him off with a glare that could have shattered glass. "A mistake." Her voice cracked. "You shot him in our living room. You never even knocked." The officer shifted uncomfortably. "We were following a credible tip. Then your tip got my husband killed." Nina spat. Behind her, Officer Dale Morgan stood in silence, his jaw tight, eyes hollow. His superior, Chief Randall Pierce, arrived moments later, a tall man with sharp features and a calm voice made for press conferences. "Mrs. Sanders," he said, approaching gently, "I assure you, this department takes full responsibility for what happened here tonight." But his eyes told another story, one that said, "Keep quiet, play along, and let us fix this before it explodes." Nina turned away from him. "I don't want your sympathy. I want the truth." That evening, at the hospital, Nina's world blurred between grief and disbelief. Every corner of the waiting room smelled of antiseptic and coffee. Her younger brother, Derek, sat beside her, a local journalist for the Brookfield Gazette. He'd always looked up to Elijah as the big brother he never had. Now his hands shook as he flipped through his reporter's notebook. "They're saying Elijah attacked an officer," Derek muttered, anger simmering beneath his voice. "They're calling it justified force." Nina turned her head slowly, eyes red from crying. "They're lying, Derek. He was holding a wrench. That's it. No gun. No threat." Derek leaned forward. "Then we'll prove it." The next morning, the department released its official statement. During a high-risk operation, officers encountered a non-compliant suspect believed to be armed. One fatality occurred. Investigation ongoing. But something was off. The timestamp on the police report said 1:43 a.m. Nina checked the emergency call log. She had called 911 at 12:11 a.m. That meant they filed the report an hour before the official investigation even began. And the high-risk warrant? It didn't exist in the court database. Over the next few days, Derek dug deeper. He used his press credentials to pull dispatch audio from that night. But half of the radio transmission logs were missing. Deleted. The few that remained made no sense, voices talking over each other, broken fragments of panic. "Wrong address. Call it in. Wait, no, hold. Turn off the cam." That was the moment Derek realized this wasn't incompetence. It was a cover-up. He showed Nina the printouts. "They're hiding something bigger. Look, these calls came from 24 Willow Creek, not 42. They hit the wrong house." Nina felt her heart drop. "You mean Elijah died because someone read the address wrong?" "Not just someone," Derek said. Officer Morgan's unit was off duty that night. They weren't even authorized for that raid. Nina clenched her fists. "Then why were they there?" Derek hesitated. "I think someone sent them." 2 nights later, Nina received a call from an anonymous number. A man's voice, low and uneasy, came through the static. "Mrs. Sanders, I shouldn't be calling you, but you deserve to know. The raid was staged." "Who is this?" Nina asked. "Name's not important. Just listen." That tip Morgan followed? It came from inside the department, from someone connected to a developer buying up homes on your street. Nina's grip tightened on the phone. "A developer? What does that have to do with us?" "Everything," the voice said. "They needed your block cleared to start a new project. Someone messed up the paperwork and used your address to run a training operation." Then the line went dead. The next morning, Nina went to the police department demanding answers. Chief Pierce met her in the lobby, calm as ever. "Mrs. Sanders, please, you're upset." "I'm not upset. I'm awake," she interrupted. "You killed my husband for a property deal." Reporters were already gathering outside. Cameras flashed. Pierce forced a smile for the media. "We have nothing to hide." But as Nina left the building, she noticed something strange. 2 officers quickly carrying boxes out the back door into an unmarked van. Inside one of those boxes, she caught a glimpse of Elijah's wrench, tagged as evidence, and next to it, a gun she'd never seen before. She froze. They were planting a weapon. Her heart pounded as she whispered to herself, "They're trying to make him the criminal." That night, she made a vow. If the system wanted to bury her husband's truth, She'd dig it up herself. No badge, no title, no threat would stop her now. Because in Brookfield, justice had always been slow. But this time, it was coming with a mother's fury. 1 week later, Brookfield looked the same. Calm streets, trimmed lawns, coffee brewing in every kitchen. But under that quiet surface, something was shifting. Nina Sanders had become a storm all her own. She'd spent 7 sleepless nights gathering proof, call logs, timestamps, deleted radio files recovered by Derek's tech friend, and photos of the boxes she saw leaving the station. Everything pointed to one thing, a cover-up connected to a local land developer named Victor Hale, the same man funding the police department's new expansion project. And Officer Dale Morgan? He hadn't spoken publicly since the shooting. He was drowning in guilt, but fear kept him silent, until that morning. Nina's phone buzzed at 6:42 a.m. A message appeared from an unknown number. "Meet me behind the old train depot. No cops. Bring proof. Morgan." She hesitated for a moment, staring at the screen. Then she texted back, "If this is a trap, I'm not running." An hour later, she arrived at the depot, a cold wind cutting across the cracked asphalt. Morgan was already there, dark circles under his eyes, uniform gone, just a man who looked like he hadn't slept in days. "I didn't mean to shoot him," he said quietly. "But when I tried to file my report, the chief's office rewrote it. They said if I wanted to keep my badge, I'd sign it their way." Nina took a step closer, her voice trembling with rage and grief. "You pulled the trigger, officer. But they built the lie." He nodded, shame washing over his face. "I've got copies of the original files, dispatch orders, the wrong address entry, even Hale's payment to the department labeled Community Coordination. If you go public with this, take these." He handed her a flash drive, his hands shaking. "Once this gets out," he said, "I'm finished. But maybe the truth won't be." Nina looked down at the drive, then back at him. "You might have shot my husband, but today, you help him stand again." By noon, the Brookfield Community Center was packed. Word had spread fast, widow of shooting victim to hold press conference. Local news vans lined the street. Inside, people filled every seat, teachers, veterans, church members, even off-duty officers who'd had enough of the lies. Nina stood at the podium, her hands steady despite the tremor in her heart. Derek stood behind her, laptop ready to project the evidence onto the big screen. "Good afternoon," she began, her voice clear. "My name is Nina Sanders, widow of Elijah Sanders, the man your police called a suspect. Today, I'm here to show you what really happened." A hush fell over the crowd. She clicked the first slide, a map overlay showing 24 Willow Creek Drive, the actual target address, and 42 Willow Creek Drive, their home, circled in red. "Wrong address," she said, her tone sharp. "They weren't even supposed to be there." Next came the dispatch log, with Morgan's voice saying, "Chief, I think we've got the wrong," before static cut him off. Then, Derek projected a bank statement from Victor Hale's company showing a $75,000 consulting fee paid to Chief Randall Pierce 3 days before the raid. Gasps rippled through the room. Reporters scribbled furiously. Cameras flashed like lightning. "This wasn't a mistake," Nina continued. "It was a transaction." At the back of the room, Chief Pierce stormed in, his face flushed. "That's enough," he barked. "Shut it down. This meeting is unauthorized." Nina didn't flinch. "Unauthorized? So was the raid that killed my husband." He took a step toward the stage, but before he could speak again, the doors opened. 2 men in dark suits entered, flashing Department of Justice badges. "Chief Randall Pierce," one of them announced, "you are under investigation for obstruction of justice, evidence tampering, and conspiracy." The crowd erupted. Reporters surged forward. Derek kept filming, streaming the whole scene live. Pierce turned pale as the agents read his rights. At that moment, Officer Morgan stepped out from behind the crowd. "I'm the one who shot Elijah Sanders," he said, voice breaking. But Chief Pierce ordered the raid, and covered up the truth. "I'm done protecting him." Pierce glared, his voice dripping with venom. "You think this ends with you, boy? You're finished." Morgan took a shaky breath. "Maybe. But so are you." The arrest footage spread faster than wildfire. By nightfall, every major network carried the headline: "Small-town police chief arrested after widow exposes corruption." Within days, the DOJ froze Victor Hale's development contracts. Officer Morgan resigned and pled guilty to negligent discharge of a firearm, but his testimony ensured the department couldn't bury the truth again. Nina didn't celebrate. She stood quietly at Elijah's grave the following Sunday, holding their daughter's hand. The wind carried the scent of spring, grass and rain, clean and new. "Daddy's name is cleared now," she whispered to little Lila. "He can rest." She placed the wrench, the same one that started it all, beside his headstone, a symbol of the man who fixed everything except the system that broke him. As she turned to leave, her phone buzzed. Derek had just posted the full press footage online. Within minutes, it began trending under one simple hashtag. #Justice for Elijah. And as the sun rose over Brookfield, Nina knew one thing for certain. They took her husband's life. But she took back his story. In Brookfield, one gunshot tried to silence the truth, but it only made it louder. Nina Sanders didn't just fight for her husband. She fought for every voice the system tried to bury. So tell me in the comments, what would you do if justice failed someone you loved? And if you believe truth always finds a way? Make sure to like this video, subscribe, and share this story. Because stories like this deserve to be heard.